Wouldn't you like to fly to my beautiful disorganized play? Wouldn't you like to join in my GM prep, my DM prep today? We're going on a magical journey together. Me and get Zook, disorganized play.
That's pretty good.
Oh boy, you know, air support is really the key to, like, sing from the diaphragm, everyone. If I can give you one tip about long, melodious phrasing, it's don't try it if you're not a trained singer. That's where I start. So, hey everyone, hi, I'm your co-host and dungeon master, Tom Lommel. This is my co-host.
Sidekick.
Sidekick?
Or
only when you have the headphones on are
Yeah.
you the sidekick, right? When you don't have the headphones on, then you're the co-host.
Right.
But if you're gonna sit there like some guy on the fucking radio, like, oh yeah, hey, Johnny Z, I got a good guy, I got a good one on line 6. That's my sidekick voice.
You guys have worked in radio before. There's several of you here. Has that ever happened in radio?
Hey, Johnny Z,
Johnny Z, I know you're live right now, but I'm just going to tell you.
Do you need any more coffee? Hey, every Tuesday, it's Tuesday, we sit together. Fuck what? What's going on? We get together and we talk about what's coming up in this week's Dungeons & Dragons game. Every Wednesday, we play that game of Dungeons & Dragons at 8 p.m. Pacific here on the Saving Throw Show. And then every Thursday, we circle back around and talk about what just happened. Yeah. So, welcome everyone. We're going to talk about a few different things here today. Actually, I have a new type of GM prep or new approach to GM prep that I want to somewhat talk through with you and somewhat brainstorm live as we do it, because this isn't something that I always like sat at home and like, oh well, this is how this should work and this is a brilliant system, this is something that I thought of this morning, maybe yesterday, and so it's just sort of like fresh in the brain pan, and we need to give it a little flips, make sure it's got a good sear on the outside before we serve it up to the rest of the GMing public. So you'll be in on the ground floor on a little thing that I call interrogating the plot. In the car, I decided it's better maybe described as query obstacle interrogation. I'm bound and determined to come up with a GM prep approach that sounds like something you could deploy on a SQL server. So that's my job here. So we're going to talk about those two things. We're going to check in with our plot radar that we did on Thursday and take a look at where things are at with that. We're going to talk about a new GM approach.
Yeah.
Interrogating the plot.
I agree.
Just wait until I get there. Let me talk through it first. And then I'll give it some sort of like 3-letter acronym, right? So it'll be like, yeah, we did some QOIs this week. We did some QOIs on our plot. It really helped out, helped me put the perspective on the session.
Yeah.
And then we're going to talk a little technology, right? Technology time as it comes up in the course of the adventure, yes? Not technology time like, hey, here's how to use an iPad. That might be an interesting discussion, but it's not really.
We could talk about it. I brought my iPad.
You brought your iPad? Cool. Well, cool. What's on your iPad, Dom? Let's take a look.
Nothing.
Let's not play the game of.
It's so old, I've had to remove just about everything off of it.
Oh, really? Oh, no.
The only thing on it is Hero Lab right now.
Yay. All right. So that's the plan. So let's take a look at our plot radar. Do we have the overhead?
We do.
Camera ability prepared.
There you go.
Look at this. There it is. Look at how beautifully well done. Right. So, for those of you not familiar with plot radar, this is sort of like various plot elements that the party is going to interact with in order of how close to the next upcoming session they're going to do that, right? So immediate means you must immediately turn off your cell phone.
That's a good one.
Approaching means turn off your cell phone in the next 2 to 3 sessions. Distant means maybe it's 3 or more sessions away, right? Yeah, and then we have things that are dangling and dormant, right? So dangling means the players are aware of it, but the DM is not planning to resolve it anytime soon. And dormant means there are things that have been introduced that the DM feels like maybe I should be introducing this sometime soon, but the players have essentially forgotten about, right? So these last two columns really have to do with like things that either the players know about that they want to follow up on but don't know how to, but you don't really plan on, like that's a later element, and versus things that they've forgotten about that you're like, maybe these guys should follow up about on this. So that's the way Plot Radar works. So let's just take a look, using last week's session as an example, of things that have fallen into our immediate bucket, the things that are on tap, plot elements, story elements that we have introduced that we need to resolve in the next session. Now, I want to revisit one other concept that I use when I talk about these things. I call them plot elements or story elements. I also have referred to them as Schrodinger's clues, right? So what that means is you may have introduced some sort of plot element. They might have found something, and they might have observed a few specifics about it, right? Or discovered a few things about it. For instance, they don't even know what it's called, right? They found a cylindrical object. Do I have a picture of it? Did I bring my handouts? Luigi wants to know. Luigi wants to know.
I feel like Luigi does know.
No, does he? Where is this thing?
Here it is.
Is it? No, it's not. Is it?
This one?
Is this it? This is it? So they have found this thing. Right? They don't know what it is, other than the fact that there's a latch on this thing that opens up and there's an empty slot in there, right? They don't know what it does. They don't know how to make it work. It is...
Ooh, thank you, Modern Chow.
Hey, Modern Chow, thanks so much.
Thanks
Let's
very
get Dom a new tablet. the iPad charity fund. We can make that happen. So they don't know much about it. And not only that, but they haven't spent a lot of time investigating it, right? But I call this a Schrodinger's clue, okay? What that means is it could have a variety of different options, functions. It could perform a number of different things. I guess that's just restating the obvious, right? But its function both as an item within the game and its function within the plot are both as yet undetermined. As such, they exist much like Schrodinger's famous cat in both a state of potential and a state of death, right? If they never look at this thing again, it as a story element, as a plot element, it just dies and goes away. It does look a lot like a Bluetooth speaker. That's actually intentional because I would like to bring in a Bluetooth speaker and play noises through it. That's like one of my ideas is to create a prop that they can actually interact with on some level or have on the table and have it like hit a little sound pad and have it make beeps and boops at the table. And I think that would be like a super fun thing once they get it powered up, right? So that when when they're in an area where they don't really know what a radiation is, for instance, maybe it has a Geiger counter in it. All of a sudden, boop, 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 it starts making noise, and they're like, "Why is this thing making noise?" So it does deliberately look like a Bluetooth speaker. But just to round out my point here, it might not be. If they leave it in their backpack and they never look at it again, the thing just dies and goes away, and it never influences the plot again, right? But at this point, they still know about it, and I could still introduce it at some point. And I don't need to know exactly what it does. I don't need to know that it's a Geiger counter. I don't need to know whether it can talk or not, or if it just bleeps or bloops. I don't need to know about this because the potential of it is still fuzzy. It's only once that they start dicking around with this thing and trying to interrogate or observe, like, okay, well, what does it actually do? Once they start investigating it, that's when I have to start nailing down specifics. So it's what I call a Schrodinger's clue, where it's filled with all kinds of potential, and only once they directly observe and investigate it does it actually solidify or crystallize into a specific thing that does a specific thing. That doesn't mean that there's not room down the road for it to actually take on new functions or abilities or play a different role in the plot, but for now, it's so amorphous that it could really be anything, right? So all of these things, not all of these things, but many of these things have that same function where they're filled with a number of different branches of story potential. And it's only once the players engage with them and investigate those things that they actually crystallize into specific meanings and specific elements within our story structure, right? So that's a high-level look at like how plot radar works and how I use my terminology on this thing, right? So a lot of these things are Schrodinger's clues, right? They know some stuff about the Tekka-pygmies, but they don't know really what they are, what they can do. They have almost zero idea what the God's Fire is. They just know that there's a thing called the God's Fire. What does that mean? Like, does it look, does it look like fire? Maybe that fire that outlined Ava last session is God's fire. Okay, well now all of a sudden that that's cool and it makes sense, but it's like, oh, it's an invisible thing that only becomes visible in the presence of divine creatures.
Sure.
All right, so let's take a look at the. we've got competing whining dogs, and this one dog is kind of snoring and sleeping, and the other dog is not. He's mad that he's not getting French fries. Dawn Razor does not as yet have Bluetooth connectivity, as far as I know. All right, so some things that we definitely need to address because either the players have encountered it, they are dead set on encountering it, or because chat unlocked it and it's an element that we need to introduce to the session, right? So we've got these doppelganger corpses and tanks, and I think that the third thing is fine, right? Like the things that chat unlock, I just look at as different elements of the adventure that weren't necessarily written into the adventure. So doppelganger corpses, like they're probably going to examine those things. They're going to want to know the purpose of those things. So that's going to come up next session. That was revealed at the very end of last week's session. The AI is an AI, not the AI, because I have definitely decided that there's more than one AI, but an AI is going to make contact with them. We saw some possible preliminary clues of that last session when they used the key card in the final room and the number pad lit up and they just randomly punched some numbers and it started to cancel out, but then it got overridden, right? I don't think the players caught on to that. That's okay, right? You don't need to telegraph every single, like, oh, isn't it weird that it started to go beep, Yeah. You don't have to play your cards that hard. We need to address the language barrier and give a starship primer. As we talked about on Thursday, the fact that they don't understand what the creatures are saying and the fact that they don't understand what plastic is was an interesting novelty for the first 2 sessions, whatever, maybe even just the first session, if you consider the last session the first one that they were actually like full on inside the ship. That's not really true, but so now we're approaching session 3. Let's start to dispense with some of that. So let's find a way to give them an idea of like, okay, this is what this thing is, and these are what these things are, right? Yeah, as Simeth Pirnikov points out, if you don't play those cards so hard, it pays off even better when they suddenly have an epiphany and they realize, oh, now in hindsight, oh, all this recontextualizes itself makes sense. Modern Chow says, so the Medbot is not the AI, but more like an automaton. Yeah, I don't think the Medbot is the AI. I think the Medbot may be a servant of the AI, may be taken over by the AI, but I don't think that the Medbot is the AI. I think the AI is probably an AI that's in charge of like, is like the Medbot, is like the holographic doctor, but not the holographic doctor, literally not the holographic doctor.
Unless Robert Picardo is watching and wants to come in.
Yeah, Robert, come on in and do us. Yeah. That would be great. I was going to say somebody at him on Twitter, and I take that back immediately.
Well, it's too late. Farquaad's already done it.
Okay, great.
I guarantee.
No, we're on a 20-second delay. Quick, kill the stream.
Oh.
So I think the AI is like the medical AI, like the repository of knowledge for healing the various creatures on the ship, etc., like the staffed crew and colonists and whatnot. But I think it deploys. I don't think the AIs have a physical form for the most part, right? We can. That's a big, nebulous area that we don't have to define specifics. It does raise an interesting question of, if there were mobile AIs, what would they look like and what would they do? And why would they be mobile, right? That would be interesting to me. But it really raises an important issue of, if you were going to make an AI mobile, why wouldn't you make them all mobile?
Sure.
Right? Or what's the advantage versus disadvantage, or whatever it is. I still like to think of AIs as requiring such computing horsepower that it would be tremendously difficult to make them mobile. Oh, my dog has decided that he's going to go. Nope, he's just going to turn around. You going to lay down?
I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe. Is there anything involved? Any incentive? I didn't bring anything for you today. I'm sorry, buddy. You're fine. Lay down.
Yes, Luigi is a greyhound.
Yeah, indeed. Yes. He's 9. So I think we can introduce owls or bring them back around. I don't know that we have to put them in this session, but considering, oh, awesome. I'm glad you adopted a greyhound. They're really great. I don't know whether Havana's going to remember that she has this thing or not, right? We'll see. It's out there floating. We should be prepared next session to deal with it, because it might come up. We'll clear that out there. All right, so yes, we have to deal with the med robot and the auto surgery area. I think they're probably going to go on once we deal with all this stuff, which is probably a major part of the session tomorrow night, then I suspect that they're going to go take on the Tekka Pygmies. That's what that was where they were at last time before they got sidetracked with all this discovery. And they're going to ask about knowledge of they're going to ask about the God's fire. That's part of this whole talking to the AI part of it, right? Some things that are approaching, assuming that the Avril's parents are with the Tekka Pygmies, which doesn't necessarily have to be true, right? Then we need to be prepared to decide or to deal with, okay, well, what's the fate of Avril's parents? Are they alive? Have they been altered? Have they escaped? There's a number of different things that could have happened since the vision that Avril had of her parents. I should also find out what her parents' names are.
Judy and
Edward. All right. Blind Seer says, Searle's Chinese room was one of the earliest descriptions of what an AI is. A metaphorical, almost waking dream sequence of that as the physical manifestation of the AI could be interesting. Thank you, Modern Chaplain. I do a much better impression of Avril, but I have to put on the wig and the lipstick to really make it work. Martha and Thomas. Martha.
So
Martha, your mom's name is Martha. What did you say?
Batman can't kill Avril either.
Why did you say that name? I'll have to look into Cyril's Chinese room. Yeah. So those are the things that are on the deck. There's also, in terms of, I'm looking at the rest of this level. This level is pretty meaty in terms of what's available, right? The library, the core areas of the police HQ, well, we have the med lab down here, but they're in the med lab right now, right? There's the kind of the research lab, but I think a lot of the research stuff is going to be down on deck 3, right? So there's the tween deck of deck 2, which, looking ahead, has almost nothing to it, which is disappointing. And then the third deck is the zoo/Earth, right? So those things are approaching. We've got some things on the docket still kind of just hanging out there that may or may not come up. It's interesting, some interesting thoughts out here. I should really cross, this didn't get crossed off. This is from one of our older sheets, but this Zoo Earth thing should go, since it's approaching, that should live more over here. Yeah, so that's where we're at. I think the main thing is we need to talk about how this AI interaction is going to go, like, or at least in terms of prep, we need to really put some thought into how this AI interaction is going to go, how we can get them up to speed on learning some of the language. I don't think it should be as simple as a, bam, unlock, you know it all.
Right.
At least not this session, maybe next session, right? And then also just getting them away in game to have some fluency with the idea of a starship and plastic and a computer, which I think raises all kinds of really difficult questions in terms of. Let's start with the basics. Does a character from Faerun, a D&D character from Faerun, know what outer space is? Like, you could explain it to them as like, oh, it's a plane outside of our world. That would make sense to them, right? It's like the astral, but it doesn't have any air. Okay, I get it. It doesn't have any gravity. They would understand the concepts of what it would be like.
Yeah.
But I don't think they would necessarily understand the idea of. I don't think a traditional fantasy character understands the idea that at some point you run out of air, and then there's just nothing forever. Like, that seems like a weird concept.
Yeah. The thing that was interesting, that's always interesting to me with D&D, Pathfinder, whatever, is that it's not, while it's a medieval setting, it is not medieval in mindset, right?
Yeah.
And that there are so many new science things involved, that, and just everything has taken on steampunk, for lack of a better word. But a lot of those things are in there. And I remember even in second edition,
Like airships, right?
like airships, yeah. I remember in second edition having my wizard take astronomy so that he knew the stars, so that he could plan things, because he was actually a shipwright's son, and so he had learned that so that he could guide a ship.
It's a great point, right?
But it's like, so
what's their understanding of what a star is?
Yeah,
or how the sun works, that sort of stuff. Like Estelle Castillo points out, like they know there's a moon. They might know that that's a place you can go to.
Yeah. Do they know the moon affects the tides and things? I think so. I think by like the 1600s, I think that was a fairly well established thing. I'm guessing my astronomy might be rusty, but
well, and even
astronomical history.
Honestly, like if you start to boil it down, like theoretically there is gunpowder, right? I mean it's probably rare, but the idea is there. For instance. I don't know. It's a very esoteric discussion that I felt like I need to grapple with it in order to figure out a way to teach them what they already know. Because that's the hard part, right?
Yeah.
You're trying to justify that the player characters know what the players already know from their basic, grade 8 schooling.
Yeah.
Or grade 2.
Probably the main thing they wouldn't know is what happens when you go out into space. Because probably nothing has really gone beyond the world of Faerun to explore that area. So
if there's spell jamming stuff,
sure,
then they really understand what it's all about.
Spelljammer.
I feel bad even saying that, right? So I don't know. The problem is that it's a really esoteric discussion, which is not an interesting play experience, most likely, right?
Yeah.
It's not. But I'm looking at different things, and I'm like, how do they measure the temperature in the fantasy world? In the world of Dungeons and Dragons, in Faerun. Right. How do they measure the temperature? Do they have an actual thermometer?
Yeah.
Why? Like, I mean, I can understand having an hourglass, and I can understand having a compass, and maybe a barometer. I don't know. Do they need to measure temperature exactly? It also starts to raise the philosophical issue of, if you have magic that can do stuff for you, why invent the supporting science to try and get there? Unless, of course, you can't wield that magic. But assuming that magic is is equitable, available to in equal amounts to various cultures, then why do I need to come up with an airplane or a glider when
just
I can
cast
train
fly?
train enough people or write enough scrolls,
Yeah.
or create enough boots,
Right.
yeah. So it creates this thing where like maybe there's interesting gaps. So they don't have the thermometer because they don't need to know. I don't know. It's weird. Yeah.
There's just a spell that you can cast that goes, it is 73 degrees Fahrenheit,
Right?
36 degrees Celsius.
Sure. I mean,
What's Fahrenheit?
I can really imagine like conjuring some sort of elemental spirit that turns from like blue to red as it gets warmer.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's an interesting philosophical debate. It is not an interesting play experience, and so I don't want to talk about it much further. But you can literally, as we just did for 5 minutes, run yourself around in circles
On a feature,
trying to come up.
disorganized play.
We'll spend the entire time over whether they use metric or English measurements, and then what types of technological tools they actually have available.
Yes.
Okay, so that's plot radar. I want to talk about this in a. I'm going to take this down.
Okay.
So we're going to move on to interrogating the plot, or as I like to call it, QOI, query obstacle interrogation. Now, this is one way to like. This provides a certain view where you can see connections to what's going on here, right? That's Plot Radar. I've been using it for a couple of years now, and I think it's an interesting and helpful way to help me prioritize what I need to prep. However, there's a different way to gain insight into your session and into your campaign, right? If we consider the common misconception is that the Dungeon Master is a keeper of secrets. And that's not true. The Dungeon Master is a giver of secrets. Your job as the DM is to reveal secrets. You don't have to reveal all of them, but if you keep all of your secrets, your game is, you're roadblocking your players, your game is frustrating. I would say it's probably suffering from bad pacing. Like your job, and trust me, like it took me a long time to come to this realization. But if you're keeping your secrets precious and behind the screen and only kind of revealing little dribbles and drabs of what's going on, you're not serving your players in a very satisfying way, right? It's a very dangerous attitude to have. And I had that attitude myself for a long, long time. And to some extent, I still have it, where it's like, oh, I don't want to give that away. And part of it is, I don't want to give that away because I'm not sure what the answer is on the other side, like what other secrets there are beyond it. Well, there's always other secrets beyond it. A lot of times the players will start to suggest what those answers might be at the table, and you just have to listen and either pick one or pluck one out, twist it a little bit, and go, well, yeah, actually, it's a lot like this.
Right.
So here's a different way of organizing our information. Got these fancy Post-it notes. I'm not sure whether I'm going to use them like this or not.
Those from Daiso?
They are, I found them at like the dollar store or something garbage like that. No, Target. I found them at Target. Oh. I found these at Target. Cool. They're very cool.
They're D20 shaped.
Our dog, very angry. Yeah. Are you mad right now? You bet you are. Let's, we're gonna divide. Oh, really? Lay down. I know.
Luigi is
Lay down.
very upset that
There are no fries.
no fries were provided.
No fries Tuesday.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
Thursday.
What a good dog. I don't have anything that I can give you, despite the fact that you're a good dog. We're gonna organize this in kind of a weird way. I would normally make 3 columns, so I should have like put a little honestly, this idea literally came to me like at 11 o'clock this morning. Instead, I'm going to create 3 rows. All right. This is what I call query obstacle and answer. All right, that's on the screen, right? Very good. Okay, what is this? What is going on here? What's the idea? Here's the basic concept: is your players come to every session. Sure, there's maybe an expectation like, oh, we're going to have a fight or something like that, or I want to go and buy this or that. Those are all transactional things, right? That's fine. Those don't really require. They require a different type of thought and preparation, right? But that type of thought and preparation can largely be resolved either by opening the monster manual or making a drawing on a battle map and putting some figures on the table, right? So if you want to have an interesting fight, yes, there's a certain number of things that you have to address, like, okay, what's the location like? Are there any environmental effects? Is there one monster? Are there multiple monsters? Do reinforcements come in? Do they have magic? Like those sorts of things, right? But generally, the job of the monster manual is to tell you that. Goblins travel in packs. They use pack tactics. That's why they have that weird flanking ability. You know. Or am I thinking of kobolds? Kobolds have the sneaky ability. Whatever it is, right? Those things are all fine. The majority of, or the biggest place where I get stuck, and probably you do too, is the players come to each session with questions about what's going on. Everything in this whole methodology, everything about DMing, everything about DM Dungeons & Dragons boils down to what's going on. It's a never-ending quest to figure out what's going on and then what you're going to do about it, right? So, why not approach this from the player's point of view? Do I want to use different colors? I'm going to use different colors. Starting to get fancy here, people. Just
Careful.
Step off.
Back away.
Step off.
The doggy fry fund.
All right.
I literally said that and Luigi perked up.
This requires a shift in perspective, right? I don't sit here, often I sit here and go, okay, well, where are they going to go next? What are they going to do next? Instead, this swaps the perspective around, and you put yourself in the player's seat, and you go, what do they want to know? Yes, I know, buddy. So here's a great one. Here's an easy one that's relevant to our adventure. Where are we? Okay, that's a question I guarantee that the players have. You know, you might put it in a different spin on it. It might be different. It might have a certain amount of nuance in terms of what is the nature of the place that we're in. That's also a relevant part of, like, where are we, right? But they don't know really where they're, so where are we? That's something that they want to get to the bottom of, right? What is the obstacle to them answering that question, right? So the DM's job is to introduce elements that are compelling and engaging, and then provide some sort of obstacle or hump for them to, you know, schlep themselves over and then get to the answer on the other side, right? Sometimes the question is, where is the gold? The obstacle is the troll. They defeat the troll and they get gold. They get the treasure, right? They get the treasure, the magic item, or the XP, or whatever that particular reward is, right? Another way we could put this, instead of answers, we could put, it could be query, obstacle, and reward. it's all bad. Everything's bad. Hi, buddy. Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't bring anything for you. That was an oversight on my part. Where are we? What's the obstacle to them understanding where they are? All right? The obstacle is they don't know the language. I'm just going to put lang. They may not necessarily know the concept. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to put alien concept. And I think really the biggest obstacle, and this is going to be an answer that's going to be very common when you fill this thing out, is no one has told them the answer reward of this is on a starship, right? On a crashed starship. You probably have an idea of what the answer is. You don't have to have an idea of exactly what the answer is until they start overcoming the obstacle. Now, what's the advantage to looking at things this way?
Thank you, Modern
Chow. This is the fry fun for Luigi.
Thank you very much.
Quick, Postmate some McDonald's over here to Luigi. Thank you. So what this does is this starts to give you an idea of like, oh, okay, well, here's the questions that the players might have, and here's places that the adventure might go. Here are the obstacles that I have in front of them, but this is the information that they're going to need at some point, probably, right? Like you could probably prioritize these answers as mandatory to undercovering the plot, or kind of like a bonus, right? Like, do they need to know what plastic is? No. Would it be nice shorthand at the table? Would it potentially provide an interesting opportunity where they could become plastic merchants in the world? Sure. If they could think of a way to, you know, like if there was transparent plastic that they could use, you know, to create a different kind of window, right?
I like the concept. I like where this is going, and QOR, core. I like that much better than what you were trying to
query obstacle reward.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
But
fair enough.
But I like the concept of coming from a player standpoint with what are they going to be looking out for, right? But you have two, as you were just saying, you have two sets of questions. You have what do they need to know to progress, right, or to get what they need to get, but also having the questions that they don't need immediate answers to, but could help the game flow, right?
Yeah.
And those may not be mandatory questions to answer, but like you were saying with the, you know, do you need to know what plastic is? No. But it would improve the game and make the game flow much faster if that shorthand was established somehow, you know? So using this to answer those questions or have the ability to do that, if you're going through here with, and of course, when you're playing in home games or whatever, you're going to be talking to your players a lot more often about that. And that, you know, they're probably going to be coming to you and go like, oh man, I wish I knew, you know, a way to do that or do something or find whatever out. And that you add in here and go, okay, what is that question on my scale? Is that a mandatory question, or is that a question that will just improve, or is that a question that doesn't need an answer and they don't need an answer to that?
Yeah, and so along those lines, what's interesting here is like, what is God's fire? And the obstacle here is no one has told them.
Yeah.
Right? And maybe the obstacle is the people they've talked to don't know. Right? But this is something that's mandatory. This is something that they have to resolve, or that I have to resolve as a DM, because the players have a high priority on this. They're really going to push on this.
Yeah.
Even though, you know, I might have some ideas. Maybe I'm not willing to reveal it, or maybe I haven't decided yet, right? But the beautiful part about this is your job is to create enough of an obstacle that the players feel satisfied that they deserve the reward of what's coming, right? Well, a lot of times this reward is just information, and information isn't necessarily very powerful in the world of D&D unless it is like very much a secret from a bunch of other people, right? You know, knowing where Waterdeep is, or knowing what the capabilities of the Waterdeep's city guard is not particularly helpful, because a lot of people know it, but maybe you needed to know it in order to get into the city and decide how to behave. Knowing that, you know, that Xanathar has a particular penchant for theater and oftentimes goes incognito to various plays in some sort of polymorphed, you know, demi-human form, that is potentially very powerful knowledge, right? But knowledge itself, in and of itself, is cheap. The point that I'm driving at is when you look at these obstacles, what's keeping them from... let me put one more example on the board, and then this will all become clear, right? This is a weird way to phrase this, but I'm just going to throw it out there. What's up with Avril's parents? I'm just trying to use examples from stuff that's actually in the game, right? And the obstacle here is ostensibly the Tekka Pygmies. And again, the answer reward here is TBA. I haven't decided. I don't know how much I want to dick with her parents being fine, okay, da-da-da-da-da, whatever, right? But the point I really want to make about the potency of this organizational style is I can change the obstacle anytime that I want. Once I realize this is what's keeping them from this information, I can change what this obstacle is, because they don't, unless it's been defined, so they know that the Tekka Pygmies are between them and Avril's parents, right? So that's pretty well fixed. But when it's as simple as something as no one has told them, someone can tell them at any time. So I could have all of this stuff accounted for in one fell swoop. You know, maybe the AI knows more than it knows the answer to a bunch of this stuff, right? Great, it knows. Oh, you're on a starship. Da, 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 da. It's iMath. We'll see you tomorrow. So that's the main advantage that I see. There's two main advantages. One, as you pointed out, is it gives you a player-facing perspective of like, what are they wondering about? What questions do they have? What are they trying to resolve? That's also somewhat accounted for in Plot Radar, right? But this definitely gives us like more of like the player motivation, what they're going to, as opposed to, okay, well next I'm going to feed him this clue, and naturally they'll want to check it out, da 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 da, right? Like that sort of approach is what gets things into this dormant category of I'm going to give them a grav belt as a piece of treasure, and then they take it, they power it up, and then they put it in their backpack and they forget about it, right? Like that's essentially what happened last session. Whereas if the question is like, if they have a question of like, how do I learn this language? How do I understand what people are saying? Then I can go, well, the obstacle is that no one has taught them the language. So they need to learn it somehow. Okay, well, how do I fix that? How do I put that in flux or whatever, right? How can I be more flexible on that? So that's really, you know, that's the basics of the approach. Like I said, I just thought of this morning. Is that but it does go down to the fundamental nuts and bolts of a role-playing experience, which is the players have questions, you present some answers or an obstacle, they overcome that obstacle. You might present answers that lead to an obstacle, and then it gets them over the hump of getting to the knowledge that they're seeking, right? Yeah, there's a number of different ways to address this language thing. I actually have some ideas for that, so I'm not going to dwell on that too heavily. But that's where we're at. So if I were to look at this thing, you know, I think, how are doppelgangers involved? I know that's kind of a messy drawing there. And the obstacle here is fairly simple. Again, I'm going to just put down NOHTD. No one has told them. But also, haven't.
No one has told them.
Oh, it's a TT, isn't it?
Not. Note.
But also, they haven't met anybody, right? And I'm not filling in a lot of these answers here because I want you guys to have some fun watching the whole thing unfold, right? And also because I have ideas about what this stuff is. But this is a pretty high priority for them. You know, I would say you probably have to put like a fourth row on this thing or a column or whatever it should be, right? In terms of how high priority is it for the party and how germane is it to the unraveling the plot, right? Like, how are doppelgangers involved? I'm not honestly like 100% sure of the answer here. So they might be secondarily involved and not germane to the plot, or it might turn out that like they're the key, you know, to actually figuring out. There's other questions that they haven't brought up yet, right? That I think they probably will come up, which is like, how do we get off the ship? I think they know how to get off the ship. So that's the flip side of this, right? Is with plot radar, you can have dangling out there, okay, well, getting off of the ship is going to be something that's in the distance, something they're going to have to do. But they don't have any awareness of that right now. That doesn't actually figure into this particular layout. This is really just taking a look at things that the party has outstanding on their agenda, things that they're actively exploring. When you give the answer to these things, it may start to raise other questions that would link then to questions that they don't have. And I would say you could almost put those in a different color here and go, oh shit, when they realize that we're stuck, how do we get off the ship? And the answer to that might be, I don't know, like, or the obstacle to that might be something like a broken engine or something like that, right? Could be something that's wrong. Or it could be broken AI. AI or other system. So, Quamlaria says, to me this just seems like a lot of needless work, but then the group I ran, no matter how much work I would put into a storyline, they would find some tangent, a minor NPC, and go off on a whole different direction. Sure. Well, I think if, like, I don't know, because I just invented this literally this morning, right? So I'm not going to tell you that this is the answer. But what I will say is that this is really manages to put you into the player's mindset. If you kind of like keep in mind, like, okay, well, pay attention to what they were talking about during the session, what they follow up on and what they don't follow up on. Then if you can identify their questions that are their priority, okay? Grayson for sure wants to know what's up with the doppelgangers, right? Avril for sure wants to know what's up with her parents. They all want to know what's up with the Godfire because that's their main thing. So I don't necessarily have to invest a lot of time into this question of where are we, because the players don't have a huge amount of awareness of it. If I start feeding them a bunch of info about this, it may start to cover up some of these other issues. It may start to take priority or steal focus away from these other issues, and then my plot line is starting to meander all over the place, right? If these answers don't help them fulfill these questions. So really what this also helps you do is identify your players and your player characters' motivations, right? They usually want something, right? They might want something as simple as more gold, more magic items, more XP. That's fine, that's the nuts and bolts of Dungeons and Dragons. And if that's all that they want, you can very easily run that game without having a complicated plot. And that's a fine style of play. There is nothing wrong with that kind of hack and slash, pound your way through the dungeon, whatever it is. Like, you can call it brainless, but just very like beer and pretzels, kind of like, let's sit down and play some D&D without getting too worried about, you know, unraveling the mysteries of the universe, right? That's fine. For our purposes here on stream, I find that that style of play isn't particularly entertaining to watch because it's really just fighting.
Yeah.
Doesn't lead to character development, doesn't lead to a lot of role playing, doesn't provoke the players that I have at the table or the audience who's watching on the other side of the stream, right? So that's why I get much more caught up in what plot lines are we following and what are the players trying to investigate versus how tough of a monster is this. If I was really invested in how tough of a monster it was, I wouldn't have thrown a CR2 creature at them last session.
Right.
That was a whoops.
Also,
go ahead. No.
I was going to say, you know, something that can help if you're not wanting your players to go off on tangents that you're not planning for or want them to. I mean, first of all, yeah, players are going to play, right? They're going to mess up whatever thing that you have planned for. However, there are ways that you can do that, and Tom has his plot radar, which basically gives you a bit of a structure to your story so that you can place them into buckets that you know where to go, and they have it's not quite railroading because they have so many options that they can do within those buckets, but you are giving them somewhat of a controlled, would you say a controlled kind of atmosphere in a way?
Well, so here's what I would say about how Plot Radar helps you versus how this helps, right? This helps get you like really get to what the player's focus is and what's roadblocking your game, right? They want to know what's up with Avril's parents. They need to address the Tekka Pygmies. Is that roadblocking in the game? No, that's going to be a fairly straightforward like fight through there, right? What this does is this allows me to see the various story elements that are on the board, and I can start looking for connections between them, right? So, for instance, Grayson's humanity is a thing that's kind of hanging out there. Like, how is that going to get resolved? Blank's here.
Thank you, Blank's
Thank you. I can see that, okay, the doppelganger's corpses might lead me to something in one of the core areas, which then might lead to a resolution of Grayson's humanity, right? So I can start using the stuff that I have in this session to act as a foreshadowing device that may lead them to or help them discover a connection to grace and humanity. It's not a great example, but Basharla's sacred vessel for sure is like she's been tasked with finding a body that her goddess can incarnate in, right? Maybe this AI knows something that can be unlocked in the library that will then allow her to create this sacred vessel, right? So I can see that path. But if that path doesn't manifest over the course of the next 3 or 4 sessions or whatever it is, I can start taking different stepping stones because all this stuff gets revised after each session. So I could go, okay, well, she didn't find it in the library, but maybe in the computer core, there's information that will then lead her to. So I look at this as like, these are all rocks in the stream, right? And right now we're standing on this shore and the players are about to step off the shore into the river of the adventure, right? A river of the plot. And they might only step on 3 or 4 of these stones, but then I start looking at, okay, well, they covered this territory. That starts to bring these things into focus, right? So plot radar helps me see when they start going off in a direction that I didn't anticipate, the new place that direction might lead me to, or a way that I can bend the existing plot elements to restructure it so that they do end up in one of the results that I have planned for without having to be totally just like, all right, give me 10 minutes, guys, because I got to think about what you just did, which is also fine to do with your players. I know I did that kind of snarkily, but like it's okay if you're overwhelmed by something that they have done that you totally did not expect to just go, all right, okay, time out. You guys get a fresh soda or order some pizza. And while you're deciding on what's going to be on our pizza, I'm going to go outside and not smoke, but make my brain smoke. So that's there. These approaches I think are complementary.
Yeah.
I don't think you could just use plot radar if you wanted to, but I think that QOR or whatever you want to call it, this helps give us a focus of like, okay, so what are the things that they're going to want to resolve? And to me, how this is most helpful is if an impromptu combat comes up, I can slam open the monster manual and I can run it with 0 prep and it will be just fine. It may not be the greatest combat in the world, but also I've run enough D&D that I can throw in some tricks and twists and some descriptions to make it interesting and evocative. And the players are all rolling dice and marking off hit points and checking their spells and things like that. So the game itself takes care of their engagement, right? What I get stuck for is they all of a sudden like come face to face with Avril's parents. You know, they're behind that door, and I'm like, okay, well, I need to know what's going on with them. Like coming up, that's a high pressure situation for me, even though I'm a trained improviser. That feels like a high pressure, like, oh, I have to give you an answer on this. That's one of my secrets. That's one of my GM secrets. I can't give that away. So if I can know that these answers are something that I'm gonna have to come up with, I can start making some choices that I feel comfortable with and that I feel like, okay, that makes sense in the context of what we've built up. And also it's going to be surprising or interesting. It's going to be a dynamic and engaging reveal for the players. That's what you want. You don't have to surprise them with the rabbit out of like a complete 180. Then they start to go, well, how does this even make sense? And your house of cards falls apart. You just have to provide them with enough information that's interesting or not quite what they expected that they go, oh, that's cool. Oh, yeah. And sometimes it's okay to just have the players be 100% right. Players like being right. You know, another piece of my GMing philosophy here, and we're kind of like way off the agenda, but another piece of my GMing philosophy is the GM's job is to reveal information. The player's job is to figure stuff out. They want to figure things out. And your job is to give them just enough of an obstacle that when they do, it feels satisfying. So So this is query obstacle reward. I think there's still some things to like some more work to be. We'll workshop this a little bit more before it's necessarily ready for prime time.
Can't throw this on a T-shirt yet.
But you know, I think if we put like some sort of a little note here for, you know, what's the player priority. How hot they are to figure it out, and then down here figure out whether it's essential to the plot, you know. And then I think this obstacle section could stand to use something that says, is the obstacle mandatory? Yeah. How is... I don't know. I'm not sure how to phrase this. How tough, and also like how mandatory that obstacle is, right? For instance, the Tekka Pygmies are mandatory. I've set them up as the main obstacle between the party and Avril's parents. How tough do they have to be? I can adjust that on the fly, right? And that, to me, is the beauty of it, is it allows you to see the fact that, oh, what is God's fire? That could be, the obstacle to them knowing what that is could be eliminated simply by somebody telling them. Sometimes it feels too convenient, and then the players don't feel like they've worked for their reward. But it allows you to see the things that are keeping your players from elements of the plot, from unlocking pieces of the plot, and then adjusting those elements in terms of their difficulty and whether they actually have to be in the way or not, right? Taking an obstacle completely away streamlines the experience sometimes and is great. Sometimes it makes it feel like either the adventure's on rails or you're just giving them information and they haven't earned it. Quamlaria says, here's an example. The party was sent to talk to a goblin king about the kidnapped prince. On the way, they happened by a dairy farm, which was just general flavor on the trail. No adventure, just some roleplay on the journey. But instead, the players decided they wanted to be cattle rustlers, and off we go on a tangent I hadn't planned for. So, to me, it sounds like there's two different traps here. One is the trap of verisimilitude, right? Of realism. Oh, okay, we're gonna go talk to a goblin king, and that goblin king obviously doesn't live right next to the kingdom. So it's a journey of 14 days. So we're going to, you know, roll some random encounters and go 14 days down the trail, you know, okay, day 2, you make camp? Yes, we make camp. Okay, who's on watch? Right? And what happened was that that game experience got in the way of what your goal was, right? Which was to get them to the Goblin King and talk about the kidnapping. Also, I suspect that, you know, long about day 5, they were like, okay, well, this seems like a bunch of like pointless camping and the DM making a bunch of rolls behind a screen. Let's get some action going. And so they got bored and decided to create an obstacle for themselves, right? That they found engaging and interesting. All right, well, hey, you know what? That farmer is a dick to us. We're gonna show him. Let's steal his cows. Okay, now there's a couple different ways that you could have addressed this. One is you could have just hand-waved the travel time and said, okay, well, it's a long, arduous week. You do have a couple minor skirmishes with some rustlers, you know, or some bandits on the road, but you scare them off without any problem. and you now find yourselves outside of the cave of the Goblin King, right? People will tell you that's railroading, that's terrible, that's awful. You're just shortcutting to the part of the story that you know. Does it take something away from them? It depends upon how you put it. If you put it, you are well-trained, competent adventurers who have no problem traveling cross-country for 14 days, it's not that much of a railroad. It's a compliment, right? If they're really curious and go, oh, wait a minute, didn't we see anything along the way over those 2 weeks that was interesting? Yeah, you saw a bird with golden wings that was off on the horizon and it flew away before you could get there, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, write it down. I can understand how there's nothing I could do about that. Those sorts of elements are kind of like a little bit dangerous, because then the wizard goes, well, I would have fireballed that guy. I have extended spell. Right. Whatever. The second piece of it is, your players are telling you what kind of game that they want to play. And clearly, they're not necessarily particularly interested in being heroes, or at least being the canonical heroes of, we have come to rescue the kidnapped prince from the clutches of the Goblin King. They're probably not very invested in this kingdom or who the prince is or the betterment of the duchy or wherever they live, right? Mm-hmm. So now they're telling you, no, we want to live a rough and rowdy lifestyle. And we want to get away with shit. Okay, well, that's the type of game that they want to play.
Yeah. I was going to say, oh, thank you so much, back at you. Thanks for subbing on in with Twitch Prime. You get a free reroll with your subscription.
It's true.
Which you can give to any player on any of our games. Games 6 days a week. So thanks for coming on in. Welcome on in. I was going to say, first of all, part of that is a testament to your ability to play those NPCs, right? Because a lot of times we've had NPCs on games here that we're like, this happens all the time on Wildcards, and it happens, I think, here on Ironkeep too. But where Jordan will throw out an NPC that no one, he's just like, yeah, okay.
You meet a guy.
Yeah. This happened when we were staying at, the players were staying at the hotel called the Brown Palace. And he's just like, oh, you're going to go to the front desk? Okay. It's a snooty guy that's at the front desk. And he starts doing it, and everyone's just like enamored with him, right? And we're just all like, oh, okay, I'm going to make this guy's life a living hell. And it was great because Jordan played it all up and everything, and it was lots of fun. I don't think Jordan had intended on making that character anything or have it be extended or anything like that, but it happened, right? And that's testament to a GM's ability of making little things like that matter, right? So take that for what that is. That's your players telling you, as Tom said, that's your players telling you, hey, that's what they kind of want to play, but also it's they're saying, hey, when you do this, we like it. Because it's fun.
It's right? Also the fundamental driver of the experience of the players sitting at the table, though, is they never. I have a huge problem with random encounters. You can go back and look at all the talk I've done about random encounters, because my main issue with them is that they end up not having a purpose, and they're just sort of like random tests of ability or random combats or whatever. Mm-hmm. And they're not germane to the plot. And the main issue with that is that the players don't know that. The players don't know that, well, this is just a random dairy farmer. Mm-hmm. That I rolled on this thing and I decided, something's got to happen here because I keep rolling, we're day 7 in and it's getting boring for me and for everybody else at the table. So I'm going to introduce an NPC that they can encounter. Oh, there's a dairy farmer with his wagon's broken down by the side of the road and he's trying to get his horse to go. Oh, we go talk to this guy. And then all of a sudden you spawn this one. Well, here's the problem. You're not sure where this encounter is going when it happens. You're like, oh, well, it's a chance for them to be nice and fix up the wagon and maybe he'll give them, a little gold or, pay them with some cheese or whatever it is. But you don't have a big plan for this guy. The problem is that the players are always looking for meaning. Why is this guy important? Why does this guy matter? And if you don't necessarily, if the answer isn't obvious, they may turn that guy into the meaning of the adventure, which is kind of what happened, right? Is like, they're like, well, we don't know why we're doing what we're doing. We don't know who this guy is, but he must be important because the DM is talking to us in his voice.
Right.
We're having an interaction with this guy. He must know something, right? The first instinct of every player at the table, whenever they meet somebody, is this guy's going to be able to help me with these questions. This guy probably knows something about the Goblin Prince. And then you as the DM step into that realism world and you go, there's no way that some dairy farmer knows anything about like what goblins are doing. So then he stonewalls the party, and the party gets frustrated because they're like, why won't you answer our questions? I don't know the answer. Okay, oh yeah, all right, okay, old man, we're gonna tie you to the tree, and we're gonna keep beating you until you tell us the answer. Now, you may think like, well, in the interest of realism, he just doesn't know anything, and they're just going to be, needlessly cruel to this guy. But in point of fact, in the play experience that's happening, you're roadblocking their quest for information. You've inadvertently created an obstacle, and they think that by torturing this guy or making their intimidation check or whatever it ends up being, casting Zone of Truth, they're going to be able to get to the rewards, to get to the answer for the question that they're seeking. So part of it is I suspect there was a random encounter that you decided to introduce to liven things up, make things, provide some flavor along the way, and you knew that it was not a part of the plot, but the players didn't know that, and they decided to keep investigating and making it part of the plot. Or they've decided to start forging their own plot because the plot wasn't coming to them soon enough.
The last thing I'll say, and then we can move on on this, because I think that's it's a really good question, because it happens a lot. I think with DMs is I planned this, and now my players are going over here, focusing on something I had no intention of them focusing on. We'll cover that in a different disorganized play. But last thing I'll say is, if you ever have that problem again, just make the dairy farmer or the cows mimics or doppelgangers or something, and just have them attack. It's just like, hey, don't touch these NPCs because you don't want to get into that.
Or use him, even though it doesn't seem realistic, find a way to incorporate him into the plot that you have planned.
Like, oh yeah, that Goblin King's been terrorizing my cows. Like, that's a problem that needs to get solved fast.
And you can even justify it with like, oh, well, I'm glad because I'm on the outskirts, and thank God none of them goblins have come and attacked me or my cattle. But I tell you something, my cousin's brother, his whole family got kidnapped, and it's a terrible thing that's going on just 15 miles down the road. And I don't know, they just keep getting more and more audacious. I suppose any day now. I've been doubling watches, and I've been, that sort of. You can use an NPC to show ripples of the plot that maybe he's not directly involved in what's going on. Maybe he's not directly involved in what's going on, but he might be touched by ripples of those events. So that he's over here and he's like, I can see where this thing is coming at me, right? So, yeah. So that's what was the other thing I was gonna say?
About that?
I don't know. You said like this is the last thing I'm gonna say about this, and I'm like, oh, I have one more, dumb Zook. I have one more. I don't know. That's all. I guess the only other thing is players don't mind railroading if it helps them achieve insight, right? If it seems like it's convenient and it helps get them to a place where they can tackle the meat of what's going on. Because I guarantee you that you were in a place where you're like, well, I don't want to railroad them just by sending them to the Goblin King. And that's fine, but it created... The real problem that you had was probably that the random encounter didn't have a function within the scope of your adventure, that it was just a random encounter.
Right.
And that's where everything fell apart.
Yeah.
Is not having either a plan or an understanding of how this random dairy farmer fit into the premise that had been laid out before them. And because the players didn't understand that and are too far away from the premise that's been laid out before them, that they're like, we want adventure now. Bam. And that's probably where the whole thing took a left turn.
Yeah. Tom and I think, both talked about modules that had a bunch of random encounter tables and things like that in there that made no sense whatsoever, that we kind of had to come in and go like, okay, there's a reason why there's a whole herd of kobolds here. You know, they're not just there for fodder.
If you search disorganized play or you search the Dungeon Bastard Twitter feed for random encounters, you'll find me like talking about them. Like I have a whole spiel about them. And my main takeaway is random encounter tables are great if they're married to a purpose or you understand what their function is within the scope of the game and the adventure. But random encounter tables in and of themselves are terrible. Like, generally terrible. They're an artifact of another time. All right. You know, the only thing that I really want to say about technology time, because we've gone over quite a bit with our QOR here and whatnot.
the core.
The core.
By Tom Lommel.
The core approach. Core. It's pronounced core now.
Okay, that T-shirt's coming.
Core. Exercise your core. DM CrossFit.
A panel come to you at Gen Con.
Thomas W. DeYoung, you've clearly been in Europe too long. Cool, blimey.
Hello, Governor.
Oh, pip, pip.
Have you been
Aluminium.
doing your DM core?
Lorry.
Lift. Take a lift. Oh, are you using a torch? You're having a laugh.
Oh, take a piss. All right, that's enough. That's enough of that. So the only thing I want to say about technology is if we look at Plot Radar, or even at our core layout here, the Tekka Pygmies are probably coming up, this session, right? We've got them in the immediate category. These Tekka Pygmies are armed with technology, so they're armed with stuff like laser blasters and gas grenades and things like that. So what we need to do as part of our prep is take a look at what's presented. I think we can go away from this. I'm kind of done with this. What's presented here in the module in terms of how some of this stuff works, and what's presented in the DMG in terms of what a laser gun works like, and compare those things and decide if that's what we want. As Captain Talon points out, there's a time and a place for it, and this module is the time and the place for it, right? Like this is this is what this module is about: is weird D&D fantasy characters encountering weird technology that they shouldn't understand, and then dramatically killing things with it.
Right.
Right. That's the basics. But there's a few things that do sort of matter, right? And some of those things are charges. I'm not going back over here. I'm just trying to get this stuff to close back up again. Some of it is things like charges, how many charges are on a thing. Are we going to use a system of you're responsible for tracking how many times you fired that gun? Or are we going to do a little more abstract thing where it's like, well, when you roll a natural one, the gun is over, the gun explodes or malfunctions or whatever, right? So what sort of subsystem, if any, are we going to put on top of that? How are we either going to use a very granular thing where, okay, start counting up the number of times that you've used it, or are we going to make it more of an abstract kind of subsystem thing, right? Oh yeah, we're not going to talk about tablets and computers at the table today. No. The other issue that this raises is the whole, in the adventure, I guess we probably should flip back over for this piece of it. Yeah. That's not it. It's this page. Yep. In the adventure, there's this whole flow chart for navigating this thing, and we talked about this a few weeks ago. I don't think this works for 5e, but I do think it's an important part of the adventure that we have to somehow incorporate, somehow honor this very bizarre mini game that you enter into where you pick up some sort of lethal piece of technology that your character does not understand, and through a series of rolls, they either come to an understanding of it or suffer some sort of consequence, whether that's burning off a charge or injuring themselves or their environment or
burning off a hand.
Or just destroying the item itself, whatever it is, right? So I think we need to find a way to reboot, remix, update this thing, do a revision that pays homage to what the concept of what this stands for, or is imbued, is embodied in this flowchart, but not use this exact flowchart, right? So those are the two things in terms of technology that I think need to be addressed, and I think the more important one is probably figuring out, okay, well, what sort of mini game? Because that's essentially what happens here, right? Is that we go into this mini game of like navigate the weird flowchart, except that they can't see the flowchart. That I think is problematic.
Yeah.
And they also don't necessarily know what the potential consequences are, which is okay. I think it's okay for them to be surprised by the consequences, but not understanding the process is a little. These flowcharts don't give you any indication of what you're supposed to tell the players once they start making our check, right? Not only that, but it uses this weird intelligence check mechanic that was not anywhere nearly as elegant or refined as they later introduced in 3rd edition and whatnot, right? This is a module from 1980, so it's like, oh, if your intelligence is less than 10, you have a +1 on these rolls. If it's over 15, you have a -1, Like, it's a really weird, kludgy subsystem.
Yeah.
I think we can take some of the advancements in game design that have been introduced in 3rd, 4th, and 5th edition and apply them to the idea or the paradigm that's been laid out here, which is using those skill checks, you somehow arrive at one of these results.
Right.
So that's the main thing there. I've already made some kind of preliminary notes about this, but I think it needs another revision, but we'll probably end up like playing part of it tomorrow night. So that's technology time. Technology is coming. Right now, so far, we've managed to avoid most of it, other than finding some key cards and describing some items in ways that a fantasy character might find relatable or understandable. Now we're really getting into the weird, like, okay, they're gonna start encountering, maybe one of these tech pygmies decides to get out power armor. So let's start embracing that piece of the adventure. All right, that's
cool.
I think we had some great discussion today. So
Awesome.
Thanks everyone for joining us. Later tonight, it's Tuesday. Tonight is it Black Bag Detectives?
It is Black Bag Detectives. Yes.
With Cthulhu's. With what did we decide it was? The Dream City of what's the Cthulhu?
Riley?
No, there's like a Dream City of Lost Cardath or something like that.
Oh, the Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath.
Yes. The Dream GM of Unknown Kadath, Wes Otis, will be here doing some Kojak meets Cthulhu kind of fate-powered action, right? That's good on.
Hill Street Blues meets...
Hill Street Blues. Hill Street Blues was
Cop Rock meets...
technically set in the 80s, but yeah, very good. So that's coming up tonight at 8 o'clock Pacific, so join us for that. Then tomorrow night at 8 o'clock, well, tomorrow at 10, there's a very special Pathfinder game that'll be happening, featuring our own Mr. Dom Zook. Who else is in that game? Who's GMing?
GM is Eric Reichert.
Let's back up. Why don't you explain the premise of what's going on tomorrow at 10?
Tomorrow at 10, we decided, I don't know if you guys saw, but Old Spice came out with this gentleman class for Pathfinder, and we were tickled by it, and so we decided we were going to play a game. It turns out in the planning of that, Old Spice heard about us doing that and is actually going to be giving us some goodies to give away. So that's fun. So anyway, we're just playing this class, and basically it's going to be, so it's Jordan Caves Callerman. It's Megan Caves, it's Kelsey Osborne, and it is myself as the players.
Are you all playing the gentle person?
Three people are gentle persons.
I see.
I am a half-orc barbarian. So,
I love this idea.
yeah, needless to say, there will be some things that will be misconstrued. But if you were curious about how the gentleman class, gentle lady class, performs in an actual game setting, this is it. This that will hopefully will tell you. It's a pretty goofy.
Not technically a sponsorship.
Yeah, not really a sponsorship.
They're providing some giveaways.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
all. It's not. We're not getting money off.
Yeah. If anything, I think they might host it on their Twitch channel, and we might get front paged by it, which would be great. It would be awesome. So
Set your browsers for 10 a.m. tomorrow morning,
Yeah.
Pacific time.
yeah. But it's going to be a lot of fun because that class is a lot of fun, and it definitely is going to be an interesting game. Someone's going to get married.
Oh, well, all right.
I guarantee it.
Maybe multiple people.
Maybe multiple people.
Why not?
Orc barbarian with impeccable manners. Yes. He will have impeccable manners for a half-orc barbarian. And then Wednesday night at 8 o'clock we go back to D&D with
Expedition to the Barrier Peaks. So the Iron Keep Chronicles starts at 8 with our all-star cast. Everyone will be here. Havana Mahoney, Gaurav Galati, Eric Reichert, Megan Caves-Callerman will be joining me here at the table, and we'll see how the stuff that we addressed today will play out tomorrow. I'm excited to kind of the thing is, the one final note about this whole query, obstacle, answer, reward thing, right, is that it's satisfying both for the players and for the DM to start revealing this stuff. I can't tell you how jazzed I was when they used, contact a deity, and they found out oh, we can only contact one deity. That was an amazing moment for me as the DM, I can't wait for you guys to find this out. And I just had to kind of sit on that, right?
Right.
So you can see how all of this plays out tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. Thursday, we have Never Tell Me the Odds with America's GM,
We do.
David Crennan.
But before that, we have at 2 o'clock.
All right, at 2 o'clock, we'll be back here for Disorganized Play again and talk about how it went. So, and then Friday, Dom and a lot of the crew from the game tomorrow morning will be here for Wild Cards.
Yes, we'll be doing wild cards with special guest Rick Budd. Actually, will be playing with us.
Who's he sitting in for? Is he just joining?
Gaurav.
Oh,
Gaurav
okay.
will be out.
All right, very good.
So Rick Budd will be joining us. And then back for Tempting Fate on Sunday, which we'll be doing
5.
Evil Dead using lasers and feelings.
Nice.
So.
Very cool. So that's our lineup for the week. As always, thank you so much for the people who tipped in, who gave tips today, and also just everybody who joined us.
Subbing up,
yeah, all of that stuff. Your support is literally the only way that we can keep the lights on here, and we're halfway through the month, and we always like
It
to.
seems we'll be swimming in deodorant, but
we always like to make rent. Yeah, unfortunately Dom's game tomorrow morning is at 10 o'clock right here on Saving Throw Show. So
10 o'clock right here.
Right here. So that's the Buzzaloony. Thanks so much to Flockwad and BSB Care and all of our DJ Regular, all of our mods here on the channel that help keep the channel safe, friendly, clean, and accessible. Really appreciate all of your hard work. Thanks again for everyone who has tuned in and shared the channel on social media. Liking, subscribing, retweeting, sharing it on Facebook, talking about it wherever you talk with your nerd brethren or sisterin or fellowship. We appreciate that. That's also our only source of advertising.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much for joining us. Until next time, let's dungeon!
I did it, Tom. I said the words, and the thing happened.
Only because I did really great GM prep.